Hi, welcome to Voices from the Left. I'm Craig. Thanks for listening. Beatrice Webb coined the term collective bargaining in 1891, describing it as a process through which workers come together and send representatives to negotiate over their terms and conditions of employment. The citation for that information will be in the show notes. With that, let's get started. So today I'll be speaking with Abby Marcus and Matt Cartwright from Starbucks Workers United. Abby and Matt work at the Starbucks located on State Street in Madison, Wisconsin, and are organizers. In addition to working there, we'll be discussing, among other things, the importance of having union representation. Abby and Matt, hello. Thanks for joining me. Abby, can you provide just a little background about yourself?
Yeah, so I've worked at Starbucks for like 3 years now. Been in and out of being a student while I've been working at Starbucks. I started at one in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and then transferred over to Madison, where I think I've been back now, like back and forth between those two stores for 3 years. I've worked at Starbucks. But the State Street location is definitely where I call home.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it was back in like April, March when we first started talking about possibly unionizing. And I'll be honest, at that point, I really had no idea what any of that really was. I had very general understanding of unions, and
Sure.
just through the whole process, I've grown to be really passionate about this and like learned what this means for our workplace and for everyone involved there. So I've been pretty involved with it since about then, yeah.
Right. And Matt?
Well, I'm originally from Georgia. I worked for Starbucks for about almost 3 years as well. I come from a town called Winder in Georgia, and I worked in a town called Brazelton. I transferred to State Street last year. I think it's roughly just been about a year. It's been a great store. It's been a great experience, except for the management in the area and the general problems we face. Unionization has always been very important to me. Organizing on both a workplace and societal level has always been something I think is very important to me. I come from a family history of unions. My mom's side of the family comes from West Virginia, from the coal mines. So I grew up on stories of the old unions and the coal wars and things like that. So it's always been something that's very important to me. I don't really ascribe to a certain political ideology, but at least in theory, I'm ultimately an anarchist. So unions are a great way to think of organizing society towards a better future.
What made you decide to join a union? Matt, you can go first. And I suspect it was not just one incident, but a collection of them.
Sure. So, I mean, again, I started out with a pretty good base level of support of unions even before I came to State Street. It just wasn't something that was always practical. I think we had a really good opportunity here at State Street. We were kind of given this opportunity to unionize because Starbucks really likes doing illegal actions. They really like doing unethical actions, and they really like treating their workers poorly. So people eventually got fed up.
Right.
For State Street, what that looked like was essentially Starbucks has a COVID-19 check-in. It's a piece of paper you sign which says you don't have any symptoms of COVID-19. This is about the only policy they have kept since the pandemic.
Just to sign a piece of paper?
Yes, the only reason they keep it, and I'm not trying to
Awesome.
the only reason they keep it is to union bust. It's a tool that they can use.
Sure.
Because it's very black and white, either you did it or you didn't do it. It's very black and white, so they like having that tool.
Right.
Now, see, when I transferred to the store, I was told by my manager at the time that, this is not something we do anymore. It's been phased out. Don't worry about it anymore. And I said, you know what? That's good for me. I'll take that. And what this culminated in was us getting a new district manager, a new store manager, and the district manager coming in and saying, hey, I noticed you guys haven't been doing this. Make sure you're doing this. I'm a shift supervisor, and all of the shift supervisors were coached on this, basically told, hey, make sure you're doing this. And it was a little bit bumpy at first, like a little bit rough. But everyone got really good at it. And it was pretty much done, I would say, with near consistency. Like, it was very rarely missed. But then we had a person at our store publish something in Madison Commons, which is a sort of like newspaper for the city, which mentioned unionization. And this person used their name and the store location. And
oh boy.
weeks later, we had the district manager coming in, basically trying to give everyone corrective action for it. So, going in the past and basically doing this, saying, we already told you about this, you already fixed it, but now we're going to punish you for it. As well as giving our store manager his final written warning for it. That was kind of the spark, I think, that made everyone really pissed off enough to actually want to do things.
Sure.
I think the store already had a really good base level of support for unions, but that's what got people motivated enough to actually do it. Especially when jobs were like really seriously on the line at this moment.
Sure, for sure.
And that kind of unfair treatment, I mean, that made me very pissed off, to be honest with you. That really pissed me off. That's really unfair treatment.
Right.
And it was very clear it was to try and come in and scare people and say, we can take away your job. And I actually went so far as to file basically an HR complaint against it.
Okay.
And this HR complaint, which is supposed to be confidential.
Yeah.
A week later, I get a phone call from the regional director for Wisconsin. And he basically outright tells me he's going to fire me. And he outright tells me he's going to fire everyone at the store and says, State Street has done its own thing for too long and I've had enough of it. I'm going to change that.
Oh, boy.
As well as a bunch of other very interesting things that I probably shouldn't get into, but very interesting things. And that really, I was dedicated at that point. I was like, you know what? I have given 3 years of my labor to this company. I think I've been a pretty good worker. I mean, my managers before have never had complaints and they've always applauded me. And the day they tried to give me my corrective action, 2 hours before I was introduced to a different district manager as, hey, this person would make a really good ASM. Like 2 hours before they're talking about promoting me, and then they try and give me a corrective action for this thing as a spare time. So I've given 3 years of my labor to this company, and then they just turned around and treated me like absolute shit.
Sure.
And everyone else too. And so I think that for me, that was I think a lot for our store too, that was kind of everyone's breaking point, which they said, we have to do something. We've been cornered now. We're just here trying to serve coffee. We're just here trying to do our jobs. Right. And corporate has just cornered us into this.
Yeah. Dang. So you said that when they approached the whole store and basically threatened to fire everybody, that was after someone put in print that they were thinking about unionizing that store.
Yes. And so that was what I was told personally by our regional director on a phone call. I mean, my favorite story about this is I have never met this man before and never spoken to him.
Okay.
He calls me on Thursday. I don't check my voicemail until Sunday morning. I call him. This is a regional director for Starbucks. I call him on Sunday morning. He answers in 2 rings, and he just goes, "Matt." that's a level of disdain.
Yeah.
And he basically told me in not so many words that he was going to fire me and that he was going to clear house at the store of at least the manager and supervisors, if not everyone. Mostly because he just didn't like us.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
And Abby, I'll get to you in a minute, but I this is interesting to me because did anyone file a complaint for an unfair labor practice? Because I think that's pretty clear cut, a violation of labor law, right? For firing someone for trying to unionize that. It happens all the time. They were doing it at Amazon and all that, but I'm pretty sure that just that alone, threatening your job for that is probably worthy of it.
Notably, they've not fired anyone yet, although they have threatened it.
Sure.
They have not actually fired anyone yet. So we haven't filed anything like that. And all the other supervisors have actually gotten their corrective action. I have not to this day. And it's really funny because my poor store manager, it's on his laptop, on his notepad on his laptop, there is the corrective action for me.
Okay.
And it's just sitting there for months and he's just never given it to me.
He's just not giving it to you. Geez.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that sounds about right from my experience working with HR people when I was a union rep for sure. So yeah. Abby, how about you? What made you decide to join a union?
Yeah, so it was pretty much the same deal. I'm not a shift supervisor at Starbucks. I'm just a barista, so I wasn't involved directly with any of the write-ups or anything. I wasn't necessarily concerned for my job, but the really cool thing about our store specifically is a lot of people come there when they're first coming to school at UW-Madison. So they've transferred from other Starbucks.
Okay.
They get here. This is their first chance to meet people, whatever. So the store itself, the employees are very close. I would say 75% of us are all each other's very close friends here in Madison. So in some sense, we already kind of had this like general sense of union with each other. So when it was that same day Matt was talking about where suddenly everybody was being threatened or being getting write-ups for all this, like it pissed all of us off because this is now like all of my friends that are getting in trouble for something that like I also had every like opportunity to fill out this COVID-19 form. Like
Hmm.
we all were under the impression we didn't have to do it. So just the people that are in charge more, the ones getting in trouble for, it just all was really insane. And they were being like just awful about it. So I think it was that same day that I ended up reaching out to, I had some mutual friends with someone at the Capitol Square store who was like really like a good leader in their union thing, their whole process like a year ago. So I was like, we weren't even saying the U word yet. Like
Sure.
when that article came out that someone had said, like, oh, we've been talking about it, like we were not talking about it at that point.
Okay.
Um, so, we were still kind of treading carefully with that. And then I reached out to him and was like, hey, like, we're having some crazy stuff happen at our store. I just want like an outside opinion, but still like a Starbucks opinion on this. Um,
Sure.
so he ended up, I think, calling me or we were chatting on the phone that same day. Next week, we had our first meeting and boom, we started the process. But it really was the same kind of thing of like, this is just ridiculous. And it just kept getting more ridiculous. Like, the the COVID check they told us about, you still have to be doing this. Okay, we fixed it. And I think for like a pretty good chunk of time there, we didn't miss a single day, a single person. Like we understood that this was like the thing they were attacking us on right at that moment. So everybody jumped on board with like, we're gonna make sure we do this. Like everybody was responsible for themselves and like took that. And we took care of the problem. So then when they came in again and we're like, oh, this problem that you fixed, well, we're still going to write you all up for it. And putting our manager on his final warning when I don't even know that he had any before that. Um, and like they can just do that. They can just say, oh, you've had no corrective actions before, but this is your final one.
Right.
One more thing and you're gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of it too was like, we love our store manager. Like, I've I've never loved a boss as much as I love our store
Mm.
manager here right now. Like he really is just a fantastic human and like does what he can for us in any situation. So when it was like threatening his job too, we all were like that added a level of like urgency to what we were doing because
Sure.
we wanted this to be a safe thing for everybody, if we were going to fight for this, we want it to be for everyone. So
Sure.
yeah, it just was a lot of like crazy, crazy corporate nonsense on top of more
Totally.
crazy corporate nonsense that we all kind of got fed up at the same point.
Right. Now that's it. It doesn't. It's sad, but it doesn't surprise me that that is what was going on because I've heard it a lot. They were doing similar things when I was a rep, and too bad the labor laws aren't stronger. I'll just put it that way, or enforced better. All right. So you guys have kind of touched on this a little bit already. You know, this, if there's more to it, great. If not, we can move on. But so how did you guys go about organizing, and were you approached by someone or did you seek it out? I think you guys kind of said you talked to each other and just made up your mind, right? But you had to find someone to actually, find the union itself to join, correct? And like, what tools did you use to get your coworkers on board without management finding out ahead of time?
Yeah, so um, I reached out to the person over at the other store that I knew was heavily involved with their union, and he basically gave me information on like, get a group chat going of people that would support this and are just as fed up as you are, and we'll go from there. So I made this group
Okay.
chat, I added him to it, and everybody that we had been talking about this already, and I think, yeah, like either that week or the week after, we had a meeting then with um, the Starbucks Workers United. They have reps in different like regional areas. So the
Okay.
one for, I think, Minneapolis, or not Minneapolis, Minnesota and Wisconsin, we got on a Zoom call with them and with the person from the other store, and we just kind of like asked our questions, like, okay, what does this process look like? Like, what would this help us with? For some of us had little understanding of what a union does for us, and some people knew a lot about it. So it's just a good space to kind of like work all those kinks out and be like, so what does this actually look like? Like, how will this actually help us? And by the end of that night, that meeting, we had decided, like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing else for us to do here, but do this. So we had meetings weekly with like our organizing committee that was pretty much formed with the people who were at that meeting that night.
Okay.
And from there, we just kind of started like really softly bringing it up at work, like, hey, you guys remember how all that crazy shit happened last week? Like,
Yeah.
there's something we could do about it. Like, you
Nice.
know?
Yeah. Right.
Um, and we had like anybody that could go, we all met at this like taco bar downtown, and
Okay.
we just kind of like explained like, hey, we want to do this. You are all the people who we think are going to 100% be supportive of this and like want this to happen and will help us with this. Here's the facts we have right now. Here's the process as of right now. Like, who wants to be involved? Um, who wants to be involved when it's convenient for them, but not at other times, like gauging
Sure.
people's level of involvement with this. And that night was honestly so great. Like, we all sat there and just kind of chatted about it for a long time. And there's a few people who like spoke so like from the heart to all of us about like, we're doing this because we all care about each other and we
Right.
love each other and we want better things for our own workplace and we want to have that voice. Um, and yeah, from there, like Starbucks Workers United has like a lot of resources and they really like they walk you through the whole thing.
Okay.
Like, if none of us in that first meeting had any idea what we were talking about, like we still could have gotten to where we are now because they
Okay.
really like every single step of the way there is someone there to help you figure it out, and with all the
Excellent.
legal stuff and this and that. So they really
Sure.
walked us through a lot of that process.
Excellent. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I think like one of the biggest methods we used was just those one-on-one conversations, especially if we had those first like organizing committee meetings. Like Abby said, Workers United is fantastic. They really helped us along in this process. They provided training. They provided very helpful discussions with our organizer, who is a
Okay.
wonderful human being and has been like with us the entire way. I love them to death. Um,
Awesome.
they were very helpful, and it was for us. I think a lot of it was just one-on-one conversations, especially after the first meeting at that taco bar. Like we just started having these one-on-ones with partners and our workers, and as it turns out, a lot of our workers are younger. As Abby mentioned, they come into our store to go to university. And a lot of
Okay.
them were not very well educated on what a union was or what that really meant. However, when it was explained to them, when they were able to think about it, turns out a lot of them were very, very supportive. They just didn't know that was an option for them. So
Okay.
having those one-on-ones, having the ability to, for me personally, when I would talk to our workers, is I would say, hey, what actually matters to you? What's important to you in your workplace? And typically these were issues that would be helped a lot with having a union. And I would explain that, like, this is how having a union would help with that. And they got very excited and very hopeful for it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. All right. So once you and your coworkers decided it was the right time, can you walk me through like the steps you took, and in particular, I'm really interested in the like quote unquote march on management. If you've followed any kind of like union organizing, you know that a lot of places, once they have enough people to get the card signed to submit to the National Labor Relations Board for a vote, they'll all march together down to HR basically. Did you do something like that, or how did that work for you guys?
We did do a march on the boss. However, that came a little bit later.
Okay.
Because Starbucks engages in such illegal and unethical practices when it comes to unions.
Yep.
A lot of our early organizing was kind of covert and very like under the radar. We didn't want to make a big scene of ourselves, and Workers United sets a really good standard for Starbucks.
Okay.
Unionizing, basically, our goal is to get 70% of the store to sign cards before we go public with it, because as soon as Starbucks figures out, they're going to come in hard with union busting. I mean, they're going to lie. They're going to try and bribe you. They're going to try and emotionally manipulate you. I mean, like you know the stories of like a store in Milwaukee where when they tried to organize, their manager literally sobbed to workers saying, "How could you do this to me?" Treat it as like a personal attack.
Yeah.
These are the tactics they use.
Right.
So you know that some people will unfortunately be, guilted or be scared, and so you never know how they might end up voting. So you want to make sure you have a good voting base for it. 70% was our goal. Okay. We actually got our card signing process done very quickly, in part because of that phone call I got from a regional director, where we were supposed to be meeting later that night. It was a Sunday. We were supposed to be meeting later that night for our organizing committee, and I think we had gotten like maybe 15. I don't know, if Abby, if you remember, we got like 15, 20 cards signed out of like the 54 partners who worked at our store.
Wow.
We had just a handful, and I got that call from the regional director, and I talked to him for like a solid hour, let him tell me all the things he wanted to tell me, all these outrageous, just egregious things, and then I turned around and told everyone else. And I'm like, listen about this phone call I just had. This is insane.
Right.
This is what he wants to do. And
That's awesome.
By the end of that day, the organizing committee, we managed to get well over 70% of cards signed in one day because of that phone call. It's one of the ways that Starbucks just continuously shoots themselves in the foot.
Right.
With organizing,
there's
awesome. A reason there's a union.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we didn't really want to make it too obvious at first. We did do a march on the boss, but that was specifically after we had already announced our public petition and asked Starbucks to recognize our union. They, of course, said no.
Yeah.
So we had an election coming up. Starbucks illegally, one of their illegal actions, sent this person to our store. Who exactly this person is, nobody really quite knows.
Okay.
They are vaguely from HR, but they never specifically say where they're from. And their whole job is to come in and union bust. So what this looked like for our store, which it was relatively mild compared to other stores, but what this looked like for our store was they were coming in with our district manager and literally putting people in a corner in our upstairs cafe away from us, away from everyone else, and spending an hour just giving them these lies. And these lies were wild. These were some crazy things, such as your union dues could be like $160 a week. The union will take away your benefits. The union will demote you. Things like the union will fire you. Things like this.
Stuff that's just very wild lies. Those are blatant lies, right?
Blatant lies.
It's not even lies. They're not even like trying to be sly about it. It's just like, what's the most outrageous thing we could think of? We'll just tell them that and scare them. Like, come on, man. Come on,
Starbucks likes firing workers who try to organize, and I genuinely believe a part of this is because they are so incompetent they actually don't know how to union bust, and it doesn't work, so they just fire people. They get frustrated. I think that's a part of why they do it.
Right.
When this person came to our store, I mean, this is an illegal action. I mean, sending upper management for upper surveillance, sending upper management to talk about unions after you announce a petition for a union, that's illegal.
Right.
So we were not happy with this person coming in, especially because, we were told by our store manager, who again is a wonderful human being, and does his best for both, his side of the work and for us. When I went to him and I said, hey, my workers or my partners, they're telling me they're not comfortable having this conversation with our district manager and this HR person. They don't want to do this.
Okay.
And I was assured this is optional. If someone's not comfortable, simply say that and they will leave you alone. And that's what I told my partners is, hey, my workers, hey, just tell them you're not comfortable with it. And they did, and they still were stolen away anyways. I had one worker who said, hey, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to have this conversation. Please just move on to someone else.
Right.
And my district manager said, don't worry. You have no reason to worry. we're going to take you upstairs and talk to you anyways, and forced them to come upstairs, and then told them that they were going to take away their college benefit. So, like, that's the kind of stuff
That's
that they,
just blatant,
yeah,
illegal action. But like, you can't.
so
It's just,
we were we were very offended, I think is a good word, by this person
yeah,
coming into our store. I
for
mean, this is
sure.
our store.
Right.
Madison is a union town. It has very deep union
Oh yeah,
connections.
you bet.
This store, this is our store. This is like our home. And this person comes in to try and scare us, to try and bribe us, to try and frighten us,
Yeah.
to keep us away from doing something which would be just good for us. And so when this person came in and they went upstairs and they got settled, the first thing that we did was do a work stoppage, and we all left the floor and we all went upstairs. And Abby here read out a letter, and I want to point
Mm,
out that this person was completely disinterested in this. They did not care. I mean, this was a powerful moment for us, but
sure.
for this person, we were basically treated as kids. This person was like, "Oh, thank you for doing this. You can leave now. You're dismissed." Although during the
Like,
letter reading, I will point out, poor Abby here, who was trying to read this letter to this person, was interrupted by them, so they could scream at people for filming,
oh
saying, "I don't
man.
think you get to film me. You can't film in here." And then let Abby finish reading it, and then just said, "Thank you. You're so brave. You can go now." It was wonderful.
Nice.
It was great.
Like, it's just like that's just like a disrespect thing, right? They're trying
Mhm.
to like intentionally degrade you as much, and dehumanize as much as possible to make them try and have the upper hand, right?
Oh,
To
absolutely.
have the
Yeah.
power in the relationship, right? Because they know it's slipping away at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so you've touched on part of my next question already, Matt, with what you just told me, which is, sadly, I believe you 100% because I know it happens all the time. But it was interesting to hear it again, like just in a different scenario. Because, like I said, it's been happening at Amazon and all the other places that are trying to organize. But is there any other like kind of like local opposition or like anti-union propaganda you guys met after you told them that you were intending to unionize? And how did you keep everybody calm, like your coworkers calm and united, to ensure that you would get a yes vote? And did you have any roadblocks like in between then and like when you actually had your vote?
As far as like other, anti-union or anything like that, like we didn't really face anything other than just from Starbucks. I mean, maybe there was a few customers who said things, but I don't even remember that there would be anything crazy like that. Um, but to kind of like avoid any of that affecting what we were doing, like we were very like transparent with all the other employee like coworkers through the whole thing. Like we would be told from our like rep with Starbucks Workers United, like, oh, if this person from corporate is coming in, like they're gonna say these exact things to you to scare you. So then
Mm-hmm.
we would right away go and relay that message and be like, hey, listen, this is what they're gonna say to you. This is the fact about it. Like, this is what you can say back, things like that. So when then these people were taken upstairs on their one-on-ones, like they'd hear these exact things that we almost said verbatim to them would be
Sure.
said.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh wow, like maybe Matt and Abby are right.
Yeah.
They're kind of bogus out there. Um so like as far as the store itself, we had like a few moments of people being like a little more like on Starbucks side and like believing different things, but it was always like super valid concerns they had that would like affect their day to day. If whatever Starbucks told them would happen, like it would affect them. So when it comes down to like caring about your family and your children or your school or anything, like I understand why people were kind of like you know, taken aback by that. But I think for the majority of people, like if they had a concern about something that they heard or was said to them, any anti-union thing, like most of the people were really like able to just come up to us and be like, "Hey, this is something I'm really worried about right now. Like, can you explain this to me or like tell me the facts about this so I don't, I know if I need to worry about this or not. And like 95% of the time, it was something that it's like, oh, here's what Starbucks will tell you. Here's why this is not true at all. Like, and here's the fact and the labor law that goes behind it and our protection, like even before we got the vote, we were protected differently than before. So being able to just like share that from a like hearing, I think for a lot of the people, like hearing someone who is more of an adult than them, like a Starbucks corporate person coming in and telling them this, like it sounds really scary and like they're a real adult, so like they probably know it's true, but then being able to be like, no, I'm your peer, like I'm not going to lie to you about this. I'm not going to like this is our job that we already are frustrated with and we already know and can watch in the news how they've been doing this to other places, like I think the timeline of all the trials with Starbucks kind of worked in our favor too, because it was like, hey, they wouldn't be up on the stand talking about violating labor laws and union busting if that wasn't exactly what they were doing to us right now.
Right,
So kind of
exactly.
just being able to find that space to level with someone where they're at and where they're coming from, like it really, like we had a pretty smooth process with all this. Like people were really open to hearing what was real about it versus what Starbucks would tell them.
So after you guys won your vote, you then had to go and get together and prepare proposals for your bargaining team, presumably to use for contract negotiations. Can you guys tell us about some of your proposals?
We don't do proposals on a store by store basis. It's a national proposal.
Okay.
No one at our store has had any like direct effect on the proposals because most of those have already been sorted out. I mean, this is a struggle that's been going on for 2 years now.
Right.
So most of the proposals have already been sorted out, but they include all kinds of very good things and very important things for workers, such as wage benefits, guaranteed healthcare benefits, all that good stuff, consistent scheduling and things like that.
Sure.
Abby, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, like Starbucks Workers United has a list of proposals that they are um, asking for across the board.
Okay.
So it helps us not have to necessarily worry about like what's gonna work for us or not. Like it's a pretty like across the board baseline, like Matt said, a better starting wage, faster and better accrual of sick and vacation time. One that's like really big and important for our store is the consistent scheduling and like hours. There are people, I mean,
Sure.
myself, when I transferred back to State Street, I was working like approximately 30 hours a week. And this next schedule, I've got 17. And I did not ask for less hours. Like I'm still
Hmm.
available for many, many hours more than I'm getting. And it's not our manager who's deciding this, it's Starbucks.
Sure.
Cutting hours everywhere. And that's, it's our store's not alone in that struggle. Um, when the first few stores started unionizing, they they pretty much were like, okay, if you don't do this, here's all the things you're going to get. We're going to give you, which was them changing the starting pay to 15 an hour. Credit card tipping was included in that. And I think a few other things like a dress code change. So for the stores that had unionized at that point, they couldn't get any of those because it would be a unilateral change. But then Starbucks in return doesn't come and bargain with them to get those things. So it's, like making sure that the stores that don't have those things get those things. And yeah, like the proposals are really sound, really secure. Like they would be good across the board. It's just a matter of Starbucks coming to the bargaining table.
Right.
I mean, I would say like it's important to note that none of these proposals are like really reaching that far. I mean, these are all like pretty
Right.
basic things,
Yeah.
a wage increase. I mean, I think one of the best things about the wage increase is that what they want what they want Starbucks to do is base wages based on the cost of living
Cost
where
of
the store
living.
is.
Yep.
And like none of this I think is asking too much, especially with a company who's making record profits,
Yeah.
both in our region and as a whole. And when I talked to our regional director about this, I asked him outright. I said, why are there workers at my store who were getting 40 hours consistently a year ago, and now they're like starving? They can't afford bills. They can't afford rent. Why
Right.
is this happening? And yet you still have record profits. Why are you cutting our labor? Why aren't you giving people benefits? Why
Yep.
aren't you increasing wages? And he told me, well, we need new menu boards. We have to pay
It's
for new menu boards and renovations of stores. And that's
blah.
where
Yeah.
this money is actually going. And then told me that, workers for Starbucks were actually just asking for too much, and it was unreasonable. And so that we should be grateful for everything Starbucks already does for us. And
Jeez.
then, what he tells me, it's a classic Starbucks line, but for corporate, what he tells me is, during the pandemic, we spent 1 billion of our own dollars. That was our money. We spent that and gave it back to our workers, and we asked for nothing in return. And now we're being greeted with this like ungratefulness.
Ugh.
And COVID was the COVID timeline was Starbucks' highest ever profit. Like,
Mhm.
which
Yep.
is just insane. Then we did this like little, they called it a fun math problem, but it was really not that fun to me. We did the math on like my average hours a week and my current wage, and it would take me over 7,000 years working at my current wage and like hours a week to afford Howard Schultz's like mega yacht.
Right.
7,000 years
Yeah.
of working.
That's insanity. So for anybody listening, so I've got some of the proposals here from starbucksworkersunited.org website, and I'll just list a couple of them here that stick out to me. So there's, under the health and safety heading, there's a process to fix safety issues at stores through a joint safety committee of workers and managers. The pay that Matt was talking about, it says that they're looking for a base wage for all workers of at least $20 an hour for baristas, with a fair way to calculate based on the wage, the high cost areas, and a base wage for the SSVs. Is that the shift supervisors?
Yeah.
I assume that the base wage for them, they want $25.40 an hour. That seems totally reasonable because it costs that much, especially in big cities, to live like by yourself. Let's see.
And all of these proposals were made by workers too. These aren't like proposals from an outside firm or lawyers. All of this was designed by workers themselves.
Sure. I want to touch on the guaranteed and consistent schedules because that's here, and Abby talked about that. So they want to guarantee full-time status for those who work an average of 32 hours a week or more, and benefits for those working less than 20 hours a week. And another bullet point here is a system to guarantee 1 hour each week, including a 4-hour minimum, with significant change to the schedule discussed with the Joint Labor Management Committee. So I assume that if they want to change someone's schedule ahead of time, they need to get that cleared, like they kind of have like a set schedule type of thing. Is that what that is going for, do you think?
From my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Let's see. Expand the leave of absence and PTO policy is another one listed here. It has vacation time. They want to have a faster accrual of vacation based on total years of service, which it sounds like right now, it doesn't need to be continuous years. It could be a combination of time worked 5 years ago and time worked now kind of thing. They want sick time and expand access to FMLA and other medical leave, with the ability to make FMLA intermittent if desired. So these all seem, these are good things, right, for the workers. Starbucks wouldn't be fighting unionization in general and proposals like these if they were bad for the workers. It's just how it works. They don't want to pay it, and they need to, right? Then the last thing here, immediate access to withheld benefits. I think, Abby, you touched on this a little bit, and I'd seen this, I think, randomly on Twitter or Facebook. At some of the stores, I think they took away the option for someone to tip if they were paying with a credit card at some of the stores. This here is talking about adding that back in, I think, right? Having apron sizes that fit the person that is going to wear it, regardless, not just having, I presumably one size, which doesn't obviously fit all. And then some additional training is listed here. So, this is all like standard stuff. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Starbucks does this very fun thing. And they've done it since the union first started about 2 years ago. It's among the many thousands of unfair labor practices that Starbucks gets launched against them all of the time.
Sure.
And it's withholding these benefits. And really, we have these things called weekly updates. And this is how I first noticed it before we even unionized, is in the weekly updates, which go out to every store, they just give like a general update of what's going on in the company, things like this, new developments. And a lot of times it'll be like, oh, look, we now offer credit card tipping. But a big headline on it says, for stores which are engaged in collective bargaining, it's against the law for us to give you that, which is not true. And that's the case for any kind of new benefit. I mean,
it's a lie.
I think this is proof that organizing works.
100%.
Because as soon as stores started to organize, all of a sudden, wow, wages went up. Credit card tipping came out. Benefits were increased as a response, which, by the way, is a crime. You can't do that. That's an illegal thing to do, but it kind of proves that organizing works, because as soon as people start talking about organizing, all of a sudden Starbucks gets scared and they start actually listening to people and trying to improve conditions incrementally, as little as they can,
right?
To try and get some kind of response against the union. But in the stores which have organized, they just won't give them these like wage increases or credit card tipping, anything like that. They just outright refuse to, which again is a crime.
Yeah, that's against the law in and of itself. When someone's trying to organize and you'll say, hey, if you don't organize at this store, you're going to get a higher wage than this store who's trying to organize. That's flat out against the law.
Yep.
You can't do that. Oh man, that's crazy. Anything you guys have to say about the proposals or anything before we move on? You guys have talked a lot already, which is great, about like the union busting behavior and the unfair labor practices they've been doing. One thing we haven't specifically talked about yet is bargaining in bad faith, which I know they're doing because that's what management of places that have union employees do just in general. But I know they're doing it specifically there because I've heard stories I've read about it. I talked to Matt about it last week briefly. So can you guys share some of that stuff you've been seeing and maybe any other like shenanigans you've been seeing from those guys, from the management team?
Yeah, so like now there's about like 340 something stores that have unionized, and not a single one has a contract. And some stores haven't, like, we've had zero opportunity for a bargaining session. Capitol Square, they've had a few where they either show up late or they come and Starbucks says their side of things and then leaves before any of the union people can speak. I was just on the bus tour for the Workers United that they're doing right now. And so it's a bunch of other baristas who have been organizing their stores. And I heard stories from some of them who said people from Starbucks would come in, say their piece of things, and then literally they had like covered their ears and walked out when the baristas started talking. Like, they were telling me this and being like, it sounds so ridiculous, but literally, like, they were 5 years old. They covered their ears and walked out.
That's crazy. It's
like
just
so insane.
wow.
And there was another person who was explaining that at with their store they had a bargaining session and they like showed up late and they had some of their like union people on Zoom at the meeting,
Hmm.
and Starbucks came in with a printed piece of paper that said we didn't know people were attending on Zoom, or like something like that, that they didn't know people were going to be there on Zoom. That was a problem to them, on a printed out piece of paper that they had printed out prior to being
Prior to it.
like,
Yeah.
it's just all these ridiculous things that you hear and you're like, there's no way they would do that, but like they're doing it, and
Yeah.
they can afford the fines and they're
Right.
tax deductible. Like they can afford
Right.
that, so it's nothing to them. Like they're going to try to just pay their union busting ways until the union gives up. And that's
Yeah.
the big thing, is like we're not going to do that, because as long
Right.
as Starbucks is going to exist, they're going to have these issues with their workers unless they
Right.
treat them better. And the
Yeah.
one way for them to get that, collective, how you treat us, how we treat you, is through a union. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yep. For sure. So the Buffalo store, that was the first one, right? A couple of years
yeah,
ago. They still don't have a contract today.
nope, not a single storehouse one.
Unbelievable. That is
Yeah.
unbelievable.
That was a big part of this bus tour they're doing, is like taking this on the road through all these states. One side of it ends in Buffalo, one side ends in Seattle. And like there were a few actions we did on the bus where we showed up at like the the CEO of Land O'Lakes is on the board of directors at Starbucks. So
Okay.
we showed up at the Land O'Lakes headquarters and brought a physical table and a sign, like, Beth Ford, come out and talk with us. Like, you can do it right now. We brought you a table. And that
Yeah.
same table they're taking along the bus, and all the baristas are signing it. So they're gonna eventually, I think, end up using that table somewhere to be like, hey, look, we have a bargaining table. Like, Starbucks continues to say that it's on the union for not bargaining. Like,
Which
oh,
is,
we're just
yeah.
waiting for, Workers United to come bargain with us. But it's
Yeah.
like, no,
That's just
you've
propaganda.
literally covered your ears and walked out.
That's that is top notch, like, shenanigans. Just like you said, acting like a 5-year-old. That's just like amazing. Okay. So next I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about like the internal structure kind of how your organizing works and who kind of does what. So I was a grievance handler and bargaining team member when I was a union member with SEIU. That's the Service Employees International Union. For anybody that doesn't know, I was in maintenance, so I had a represented position. There was a separate person, our actual union rep, who was employed by SEIU, who would come and help things out, right? Like, but I was a worksite leader, so I was what people might call a union steward, kind of. Our contract just had the word worksite leader in it. But I would do things like grievance handling, like I said, bargaining team member. I would go to orientation for new employees and give the presentation and hand the people their cards to sign. And so I'm just a little bit curious about how the structure at Starbucks Workers United is for you guys in that regard.
Our store, we do things through an organizing committee. There's no shop steward at our store or anything like that.
Okay.
It's actually kind of a purely democratic process.
Okay.
It's just a group of workers who we meet every week or so.
Okay.
Sometimes even depending on circumstances, sometimes more than once a week, and we just discuss everything that's going on, and we decide as a group what to do, how to respond to things, how to move to things next. We don't have a shop steward per se, but we have our union representative who represents all unionized shops in Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Abby, do you have anything to
add? We've had light conversations about within our own organizing committee, kind of like electing certain people to do different tasks within the whole process, but we haven't got as far as actually figuring that out yet. But
Okay.
I think that'll be kind of something that we're working towards now.
Sure.
That we've got our vote. Things are kind of settling a little.
Sure. Yeah, organizing that stuff takes time. It's just the way it works. You can only do so much while you're working, right? And you can't
Right.
technically do it while you're working, right? Right. That is, in fact, not okay. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and lie to people and say I didn't have conversations on the clock when I was when I was a worksite leader, because it just happens sometimes, right? Like I got off the elevator one day and I had 3 CNAs like waiting for me to start working that day. And as soon as I got off the elevator, all 3 of them were just like, hey, this thing happened and this thing happened. I was like, guys, I'm sorry, but I'm on the clock. I cannot have this discussion with you. I can get in trouble for this. So like, I will set up time with you to meet on break, if like on lunch break, if we need to. Otherwise it'll have to wait till after work, or just send me a text message so I have some idea and I can pass that along to our union rep so she's aware of it, and maybe she can come down and help you guys, because I'm actually on the clock. So I can't do that. So it was just so weird to see that like behavior. And like it was just like, because it was a skilled nursing facility, so there was all kinds of crazy stuff happening there too. I'm not going to get into too much more about me, but like I feel that when you guys are talking about like organizing yourselves, right, in your own meetings and figuring out who's going to handle what, like, yeah, that's crazy stuff. All right, so you brought it up a little bit, I think, but there's a second location in Madison that's also unionized. That's the Capitol Square store. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's on the corner of MLK and like Pinckney or
Maine.
something. And
I
It's
think it's East
yep,
Main.
East Maine
East
and
Main.
okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and that's right off the square. You see it all the time if you go up there for the farmers market, or if you're
Yep.
going to school there, I'm sure people see it. Or if you're going to the Monona Terrace, you walk right by it. All right, what was I going to say? So that's obviously awesome to get that second store. I think the biggest news, though, of very recent note, is that it was 10 days ago now, the Chicago Roastery filed for their vote to form a union. Totally awesome. That's totally awesome, because they're the biggest one in the country, right? As far as
Yeah.
like employee size, is that right?
Yep. I was
And
there when they filed.
that's awesome that you were there. Can you give us some color on what that was like?
Yeah, so they had we were like the bus was stopping in Chicago, so like the Illinois representative was, in contact with all of us, talking about how they needed like, however many more cards before the bus got there, to make sure like everything went smoothly. So I actually got to be on like a little inside mission. So I wore like regular clothes and not my shirt that said Starbucks Workers United. I had something over it, and I had all their like buttons and pins in my bag. So I got to
Okay.
go in and just act like I was a customer,
Mm,
and there was like one of us on each floor, and then like the rally started outside. They did a huge rally, like there was a bunch of speakers. The bus rolled up, and the bus had a big sign on it that said the union is calling, and like
mm,
it's a big sight. You walk past the roastery, you see something is happening, and like
sure.
there's no way to avoid it. So people were outside like handing out these little leaflets that just say, like, Starbucks has broken labor law over 200 times. Like, here's a QR code. You can find out
Wow.
more, like, learn how to help and things like that.
Sure.
And, it was kind of like a strike line without actually like picketing of any sort. Like, there was no line to
Sure.
cross, but it was like the
Sure.
same energy as that.
Okay.
But being inside, like before I got the go ahead to be like, oh, it's official, here's all your pins, I was just kind of like walking around, and it's like a glass building. And on the other side of it, I see like the people I'm with on the bus in megaphones, chanting. They're doing, big chants with everybody. There's like 30 people out there at least. And they had turned the music up so loud inside, I couldn't hear a thing. Like not a single thing. If you were already in the store before they started that rally, you would have no idea anything was happening outside. And the craziest thing to me, like I kept hearing this and I was like, there's like no way. Like this cannot be real. In 2023, no way. They actually had Pinkertons on every single floor.
I heard about that. That's
And like
craziness.
I kept thinking like, no way. Like that's bogus, you know?
Yep.
And then no, I saw it with my own eyes. Like every single floor they had went on. And there was, you know, like inside, if someone was asking someone like, oh, what's going on outside, they would just like glide right over the topic. And when it was finally like they had officially filed, um, had hit that mark and I got the go ahead to like congratulate them. I went up to the counter at the first floor and I was like, "Oh my God, I hear what's happening outside. Like, congratulations. I'm just a really supportive customer who happens
Yeah,
to have a million pins in my bag. Like, here
that's
you go."
awesome.
Trying to make sure they weren't going to kick me out.
Yeah.
And they were all like a little hesitant at first. And I opened my jacket and I was like, "No, like, I'm with you guys outside." And they're like, "Oh, you're the sign?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's time. Like, it's official. Here's your buttons." So
Oh,
it
that's
was
awesome.
really, really awesome. And being able to then, like, I got to go outside and join the rally. And, like, I mean, we were like leafleting out there and like chanting and whatnot and just getting as much noise as we could for the people that were like about to walk in. So I'm no shame. I was standing right in the line, like before the doors, being like, "Hey, like it's cool in there. Go get your coffee, but also you should learn about this. Like
Yeah,
it is
right.
important. And like if you're, you know, going in here and getting a service from these people, like you should know about how their employee is treating them." And honestly, a lot of the people going in there were pretty like open to hearing about that. We got a lot of good like response to that. Enough not good response too, but like it's the people who don't ever have a reason to care about unions and they just want their fancy coffee.
Sure.
We're not always going to win those people, but
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it was really incredible and such a huge like push in the movement. You know, like there's I mean, however many stores, however many partners, but you add a store that has like 200 something partners, that's just an incredible amount of like force on top of this.
Yeah.
And 3 out of 3 roasteries now in the States.
Man, that's great. It sounds wild. I know I saw some brief videos on, I don't know, Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and it was looked like a wild time. So it's awesome that you were down there. That's
Yeah.
really, really awesome. Um, Matt, do you have anything to add about the Chicago Roastery?
No, I think Abby had all the good info on that one.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. You touched on it a bit earlier, Abby. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Starbus and what the like specifics are for that?
Yeah. So, um, we got talked to about like, oh, you have this opportunity if you want, the day that we won our vote. And at first it was like, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was gonna be really boring. I was like, okay, like a whole like week or so of just like 100% focus on the union. Like it to me was felt like it was gonna be overwhelming. Maybe boring was the wrong word, but I expected to be really overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And so they had me fly out to Minneapolis, and from Minneapolis, that's where the kickoff of the bus tour went. So we had like a press conference the first morning with there was like a representative from Minnesota who came and spoke. A bunch of baristas spoke. We just, you know, kicked the whole thing off, and it basically was like the whole point of it is taking like the struggle of getting our contract on the road and showing Starbucks that we're not afraid to like get the word out there and like, you know, bring them a bargaining table and do everything we can publicly to make sure that people know that like we are not the problem here in getting this contract. Like we have been fighting for this. We have, you know, everything we need figured out. We just need Starbucks to come to us. So we're going to go to them. So part of it was, like I mentioned earlier, going to the different people who are on the board of directors of Starbucks and going right to them either at like
Yeah.
the Land O'Lakes headquarters, but we did a few like in different cities. We would go to like the Lego store in a mall or the Nike
Okay.
store and a few other ones that are on the board of directors
Sure.
with, again, signs with their face on it being like, hey, you're breaking labor law at Nike and at Starbucks, and your customers should know about this. There was a big push to get like customer involvement because clearly Starbucks is not listening to us,
Right.
but they're gonna listen to the people who are giving them money.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so if we can get, like a huge part of it wasn't even like boycott Starbucks, don't go to Starbucks. It's just like be educated in this. Understand that this is a fight that a lot of your baristas are in. And if you support the people who are making your coffee every day, like you'll take the time to, like we had these leaflets with a QR code. And a lot of people were like, it takes 5 seconds to scan this, scan it, it plugs you right into um like a process that will let you know when local things are going on for you and how you can help the baristas, how you can help the union fight, and like what you can do as a customer to kind of help pressure Starbucks into like not breaking the law.
Right.
So there was a lot of like outreach to non-union stores where we would show up and one of us would go in as a barista and be like, hey, I'm a barista in Madison. Like, I don't want to bother you and get crazy corporate presence here in your store, but we're with Workers United. We've got this information for you. We're just going to be outside of your store talking to your customers, kind of like showing them that, like, hey, you have our support in your choice in this
Sure.
matter. And we're also showing that you have your community support that you may not even know that you have.
Sure.
Which a lot of the baristas were like really, a lot of them like thanked us. They're like, we have heard about the union, like we've heard about this whole thing, but we don't really know what to do or where to start. And we didn't know if people would support us. So like having you here literally showing us that our community is going to support us if we do this means a lot. And there is a lot of like intake forms on the Starbucks Workers United like website that were filled out after we stopped at stores. So let's see what else. There's like two legs of the trip. It's still going on. And one of them is going to end up in Buffalo, one ends up in Seattle. So the end goal of this is to get honestly like enough media attention and public attention to like makes like honestly kind of like corner Starbucks into
Sure.
doing what they are legally obligated to do for us at this point.
Right.
They can't keep ignoring the fact that people are unionizing and that people want, to do this.
Yeah. Well, they want better working conditions, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what it's all about, right? Better working conditions so that you can afford to live, so that you're not, working in dangerous conditions, stuff like that.
Right. And a big part of the trip too, we in every city that we stopped at, there was like the Teamsters were doing like their practice picket
Awesome.
in Chicago. So we went there and we, stood there in solidarity with them. There was people from SEIU along the whole trip, other people from Workers United, from like many different union organizations, showing us that like our movement is really impactful to theirs and theirs is really impactful to ours, and like unionizing beyond just your own company is really like powerful. And I mean the Chicago like Teamsters practice picket was insane to me. Like we showed up there and we really didn't know exactly what to expect, but like the people from all different groups, not even just UPS and different drivers and things that were there, like in solidarity with them, like just sharing in that power of the people was really, really cool.
Awesome. Yeah. I like that you wrap that up nicely with power of the people, because that's what this is about, right? That's what collective bargaining, what organizing, all of that is the working class taking back the power, so that we can start having better conditions for working, so people can afford to live, people can afford to buy a house, right? Or even pay rent, right? Buy food. We're not
Right.
talking about people wanting to everybody to own a Lamborghini, right? They want to
Right.
eat food, right? Like it's not, it's a pretty simple thing as far as I'm concerned. Do you guys have any advice for anyone looking to unionize their workplace, whether it's at Starbucks or anywhere else?
I think honestly, my piece of advice here would be like, um, don't think that you can't do it if you don't know about these things. I think I might have touched on earlier. 5 months ago, if you told me that I would be helping organize my store and going on this trip with Workers United across the country to share in this, like I would not have believed you because I probably would still have a million questions about what a union was.
Sure.
Um, there's no like blueprint way of doing this, like the what it comes down to is people. And if you have people that care about your work and what you're doing and how you're treated there and you want that to be better, like it doesn't matter if you're, 15 in school, 30 and in your life career, um, you can learn, and it's really good learning, and like it impacts so many different parts of your life, not even just at work. um there's no right way to do it, you just have to do it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like
Sure.
get that collectiveness together, and it just starts with conversations, it starts with wanting better for you and other people.
For sure. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I would say the best advice is just to be bold, honestly. As Abby said, it starts with conversations. This is about a better future and a more hopeful future for everyone.
Right.
And unionization connects to everything.
Yep.
Unionization is where it starts, the democracy of the workplace, but it connects to every other issue. And it is a scary thing, because you're talking about your livelihood in many cases. You're talking about,
Yep.
jeopardizing your livelihood. You never know what's going to happen. And let's be honest here, companies do illegal things. Bosses will do illegal things.
Yep.
And that's scary, right?
For sure.
But it's your choices that define you as a person ultimately. It's all that matters is what you chose to do.
Yep.
And when you're faced with these questions, when you're faced with these hard decisions, what you choose to do defines you. And I would say the best thing to do in that case is to have boldness. Generations of people have come before us. I mean, in my own family, coming from, the mines in West Virginia, when they wanted to organize because they didn't want to work 16-hour shifts, when
Right.
they wanted to organize because they wanted to be paid in US dollars, not company tokens. When they wanted to organize because,
Right.
one of my family members was smashed by a minecart and killed when he was 15.
Jeez.
When they wanted to organize because of stuff like that, it wasn't Starbucks who came in and said, no, I'm going to fire you. It was the US government who came in with guns.
Right. Yep.
And, we're going to put you down. You
Yep.
will work or we'll jail you, we'll kill you. And they didn't back down. They fought. And from generations and generations, those who came before us have fought. And, how are we going to be afraid of Starbucks or of Amazon firing us when those who came before us have fought against so much more and under, even worse circumstances. And
Right.
they risked their lives. They gave their lives for this.
Yep.
To make a better world. And it ultimately comes down to each one of us and taking a personal accountability for the future we're building. Every act we do, everything we do is building a future. So when we fail to act, when we fail to take responsibility for that, we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting our future. So my best advice is just be bold. Say, you know what?
Yep.
It doesn't really matter. I'm going to die one day. None of this matters, but I'm going to build a better future. Even if that gets me in trouble, even if, that gets me shit canned, I don't care. I am going to build a better future, and I'm going to take my personal accountability in that.
Sure. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, for sure. I can't agree more with that sentiment for sure from either one of you. It's really great. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic for me for a number of levels. It's been therapeutic because of what I went through years ago when I was a worksite leader and was trying to bargain with, it was an established union already. So we didn't have to go actually form the union. I just joined because I worked there. But I feel every bit of what you guys are saying because I went through very similar things, whether it was in bargaining or a labor management meeting or in a grievance meeting. is just it's I feel it, and I really appreciate your guys' time. If people want to find the Madison stores on social media, where can they find you guys?
On Twitter, our State Street store is at State Street Bucks, BUX, and then the Wisconsin Starbucks Workers United is WISBWU on Twitter.
Okay.
For Instagram, the Wisconsin Starbucks Workers United page is WISSWU.
Okay, excellent. And I will have that information in the show notes for anybody that wants to like and follow those accounts to stay up to date about what's happening with those guys. I'll have information about I'll have the link to StarbucksWorkersUnited.org in the show notes. And I can't thank you guys enough for joining me. Like I said, it was a pleasure. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thanks for listening. That does it for the show. The plan right now is to have episodes released monthly on the third Wednesday. Thanks to my guests. Special thanks to Nick Josephs for the use of the theme song. You can find Nick on Spotify and on the web at nickjosephs.com. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at dystopian_grift. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe on patreon.com/voicesfromtheleft or donate on buymeacoffee.com/voicesfromtheleft. All the links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, and solidarity.